The version of you that comes out on the other side of staying committed, of choosing courage over comfort, of refusing to let the fear of failure be louder than the fire inside of you, that version is worth every hard moment it takes to become who you are. You have what it takes. You just have to decide to keep going. Welcome to Parents and Teens Rising, the podcast that bridges the gap between parents and teens and helps families thrive. I'm Jasmine Chandler, teen and parent coach, wilderness rites of passage guide, and founder of Guided Passages. After over 16 years of working with young people, I know how challenging and rewarding these years can be. Each week, we'll explore real conversations, practical tools, and fresh perspectives to help you connect with your teen, support their confidence, and navigate the ups and downs. Let's rise together. Hey everyone, welcome back into the podcast. So today I want to talk to you about a lot of things. I was inspired while I was at the gym this morning, and I was really thinking about and celebrating the fact that I am running a wilderness backpacking rite of passage trip for middle schoolers this summer that is completely sold out. And for me, this has been no small feat and has been years and almost a lifetime in the making. And it made me start to think about the power of persistence and tenacity and self-belief and never giving up. Because there have been so many points along the way where I could have thrown in the towel or walked away and given up on my dream, but I didn't. I have stuck with it. I have followed my calling. I've listened to myself. I've put in the hours and the blood, sweat, and tears it has taken to get my version of this work out into the world. And today I want to pause and take note of it because it's worth celebrating. And I'm hoping that through my story, you and maybe even your teenager can be inspired to go after your dreams too and to stick with them no matter how long it takes. For me, this is one really big win, but I'm still working on and calling in some other big things too. One of which is to fill my second backpacking trip for high school girls this summer that I'll talk about a little bit later in the episode. But today, what I want to unpack is some of the journey that's brought me to this point and to give you some insight into the things I'm relentlessly working on and dreaming up right now, and why I believe going after your dreams with an unwavering determination is the spice of life that will not only push you to grow in unimaginable ways, but will bring a level of fulfillment and confidence and courage and strength that is hard to come by without it. So first, let's start with a little science around grit and perseverance when it comes to going after your goals and not giving up, because I love when the data backs up what we feel in our bones to be true. So the most well-known researcher on this topic is Dr. Angela Duckworth, a psychologist at the University of Pennsylvania. And in her landmark 2007 study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, she introduced the concept of grit as a measurable psychological trait. She defines grit as the tendency to sustain interest in and effort toward very long-term goals. Not just a sprint or a hustle for a short period of time, but talking about the kind of deep-rooted long-haul commitment that keeps you going when results are nowhere in sight. And she found a lot of really cool things. But what her research suggests mostly is that when it comes to high achievement, grit may be as essential as intelligence. And that is really significant because for a long time, intelligence was considered the key to success. But intelligence leaves a lot unexplained. So there are smart people who aren't high achievers, and there are people who achieve a lot without having the highest test scores. In fact, in one of her studies, smarter students actually had less grit than their peers who scored lower on an intelligence test. So if your teenager has ever been told they're not smart enough, not talented enough, or don't have what it takes, I want you to hold on to that finding because the research is telling us something different. So one of the things that Duckworth did was to ask thousands of high school juniors to take grit questionnaires and then waited more than a year to see who would graduate. Grittier kids were significantly more likely to graduate, even when matched on every other characteristic she could measure. Grit predicted outcomes more than GPA, more than test scores, and more than talent. One thing I want to make note of here, though, is that grit isn't just grinding and white-knuckling your way through life. Research published in PNAS found that passion is actually key to what makes grit work. And that's really exciting because the more passionate you are about something, the easier it is to build your grit around that thing. Another important researcher in the field is Dr. Carol Dweck of Stanford University, who spent decades studying something that she calls growth mindset. And she defines growth mindset as the belief that intellectual abilities are not fixed and that they can grow in response to dedicated effort and trying new strategies and seeking help when appropriate. I also think it's important to mention the work of Dr. Albert Bandura from Stanford, whose research on self-efficacy is some of the most cited in all of psychology. Self-efficacy is the belief in your capacity to complete a task, and that belief directly affects the course of action you take, the effort you apply, and your perseverance in the face of adversity. So, put more simply, someone with high self-efficacy believes they will pass the test, clear the hurdle, or make it to the top of the mountain. And because they believe they can, they set bigger goals, persevere through challenges, and bounce back more easily from setbacks. He found that one of the most powerful ways to build self-efficacy is through what he calls mastery experiences. When you push through initial setbacks and eventually succeed, those victories are especially rewarding, showing you clearly that perseverance pays off. Successfully navigating setbacks can actually lead to even stronger self-belief than never facing difficulty at all. So every time your teenager faces something hard and doesn't quit, they are literally building the neurological and psychological foundation for believing they can do hard things in the future. And that's the gift of struggle. And that's why I'm so passionate about the work that I do. So, with all of that as our foundation today, I want to share some of my journey that's brought me to this moment because the science only means something when you can see it lived out in real life and it's not just something on a piece of paper. If you've been listening to this podcast, you've probably heard some bits of my own rites of passage journey several times, but I'm going to share it again here because it was the catalyst for all the things that I am now accomplishing in my life 30 years later. I was actually just sitting down with my mentor who brought me out when I was 19. And I sat with her yesterday on Mother's Day and brought her some flowers. And we sat and we were reminiscing. And I was just like, wow, that was actually like 30 years ago that you brought me out on this trip. And now we're talking about all these things that I'm bringing forward in my work with rites of passage. And that all started way back then. And so that's why I just feel like this particular type of experience for teenagers can ultimately change the entire course of their life. Something inside changes when we go through these types of experiences, when we separate from the noise, from all of the to-dos, from the screens, from the comforts that we normally experience, and we are put out into nature. Nature is the ultimate nervous system recalibrator. It's the ultimate, God, I almost feel like it's the ultimate healer of our spirit because it's so confusing out in the world about who we are and what we're supposed to do. But when we sit outside in nature and we're quiet, all of a sudden we remember things about ourselves and we remember how connected we are to all of life. And something in us starts to shift. And when we do that in combination with a challenge where we're pushing ourselves through something really hard, something that scares us even, and then we get onto the other side of that hard moment, we are a different person. There's no going back. Something has changed internally inside of us after an experience like that. And that's what happened for me. So when I went out on my first trip, it was a 10-day trip in the Steens Mountains of Eastern Oregon. And I believe there were about 8 other young people on that trip. My little brother was one of them. And we were sitting in circle together. We were listening to each other. We were having some powerful teachings around the work of, finding out who you are and asking bigger questions of life and of yourself. And we were in preparation for going out onto our own solo time. And during our time in preparation for our 4 days solo, they were giving us lots of tools, things that we can do for ourselves, things that we can think about, prompts that we can write about in our journals and all of that. And, preparing us for safety and all of the things. And then they sent us off into each of our own spots out in the desert, and we found our spot out there and we were completely alone, couldn't see anybody. It was quite a walk that we took to our spots, some further than others. Some people even crossed a river to get to their spot. Some went up a mountain to get to their spot. And once I was in my spot, I was there. I was sitting with myself for days on end with my tarp and my sleeping pad and my sleeping bag and my journal and water. And that was what I had for 4 days. And, it was something to be with myself like that for the first time. And on that trip, the thing that I want to share this time in this story is the fact that I didn't actually make it through all 4 nights of that trip. I made it through 3 nights, and on the fourth day, the storm came. And it was a storm like no other storm I'd ever experienced. To me, my 19-year-old self, who, was still a kid, I literally felt like I was going to get swallowed whole by the earth, that it was going to crack open and swallow me. The thunder that was happening was so terrifying. It was the loudest thing I'd ever heard, and the earth literally shook every time the thunder came through, and it was so close. I could see lightning striking not very far off in the distance. The tree that my tarp was attached to had been struck by lightning in the past and had a burn scar. So it felt very, very real. And if you've ever been in actual like fight or flight mode, I was there. And I tried to sit there through the fear and all of that, but just my flight took over. But my stress response took over, and I just started throwing stuff into my backpack as fast as I could. The rain is coming down now. The thunder continues to shake. The lightning's striking everywhere. And I just grabbed everything I had, threw it in my backpack, and ran as fast as I could back to base camp. I was literally terrified for my life. I thought I was going to die. That's what it felt like. And I ran back to base camp. And as I walked into base camp, and there were the guides, the storm completely stopped. The thunder stopped. A rainbow appeared, and they welcomed me in with a hug and asked me what I needed, and asked me, if I wanted to just sit down and talk with them, or if I was done, if I wanted to come in. And I said, I'm done. I'm done. I had enough. 3 nights was enough by myself. And I came in, and I still, didn't feel like my whole experience was completely done. And one thing that I felt was really important in that moment was I wanted to really mark this transition from being a child and stepping into my young womanhood. And I asked the assistant guide on that trip to cut off my hair. I had very long hair, similar to how I have it now. And she said, okay, but this isn't going to be a pretty cut. This is not a salon. And I said, okay. And so she put my hair in a ponytail, and she just chopped the ponytail right off. And that was me just, completely letting go of all that had come before and saying, okay, I'm different now. I'm different now. I'm not who I once was. I'm stepping into my life in a new and empowered way. This is who I am now. And, something about that just reoriented something inside my entire system. And it, pushed me into my life in a new way that I never would have before conceived of or thought possible. And when I went back home after that trip, I realized that I had changed, but nothing around me had changed. And so I didn't feel like I fit anymore. And I really wanted to go find a place where I just felt like I could just be the full expression of myself in whatever life was asking of me. And ultimately, the assistant on that trip ended up leading another rite of passage the following year. And I took my brother and 8 of our friends, and she took us on another 10-day trip, this time up the Nepali coast on the island of Kauai, Hawaii. And we had another experience, a 10-day experience, 4-day solo. And this time I went and I did the 4-day solo, and I made it all 4 nights. And that was me saying, like, I want this full experience. I got a little taste of it before, but I want to really experience and persevere through the whole thing. And I did it, and it was amazing. And it was not only this whole, 4-day solo and all of that, but the trek in and out of that valley is something. I had never backpacked before at that point. I'd never camped before at that point, and hiking 11 rigorous miles on one of the trails that's ranked, one of the highest levels in the United States for difficulty was such a feat. And coming out on the other side after that experience and still needing to make it back out by the time, we were hiking back out on that final day, we ran into darkness and all of our flashlights ran out of batteries, and we were like basically crawling along this trail for the last 2 miles. Like, it was so challenging. I was pushed to the brink on that trip. But again, I persevered through it and I made it on the other side. And when you make it on the other side of those types of experiences, again, your whole system reorients and you're like, okay, if I can do that, what else can I do? Right. And so after that trip, I was like, all right, that's it. I went home. I sold all of my stuff and I moved back with a backpack, and I was camping on the beaches and going in and out of that valley and, just exploring and discovering myself and playing music and dancing on the beaches and just, being young and free. And it was really, really an amazing time. And while I was there, while I lived on the island, I put myself out on a couple other 4-day solos. I just once I got that taste of being alone in nature and going through those challenges and fasting and just having the ability to be empty and clear and connect to nature in that way, I just wanted more and more. And so a couple more times just by myself, I'd put myself out and I'd go out for 4 days and 4 nights and yeah, just couldn't get enough of it. And ultimately I ended up moving to Southern Oregon, where I, set up a home for a bit and was feeling a little bit lost for a while there. It was a couple years where I was kind of just going from job to job and kind of again at that place of what's next? What is for me after all these things that I've discovered about myself and learned about myself? And ultimately that led me to go to the University of Oregon and study dance and history. And I ended up double majoring. And so I was, doing this incredible amount of coursework, 20 credits a term, and, doing all these dance performances and extra rehearsals and all of these things too, which again, just felt like this very big, challenging feat that I made it through in a couple of years, ended up with my 2 bachelor's degrees. And right out of undergrad, I got hired to start a dance program at a high school in Arizona. And I moved there with my fiance at the time, and we both ended up teaching in that district. And again, I had no idea, how to teach. I had no idea how to run a program. I had never done anything like it before. It was terrifying. They threw me into a classroom with 30 students 5 times a day, a tiny little room that was a classroom that we converted into a dance studio that was so tiny. I mean, probably 150 square feet or something. It was so tiny. And I just did it. And I think part of my ability to just go and try this thing out was the fact that hey, I know I can do hard things. I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I've done hard things before and I'm going to figure it out. And I did. I figured it out. I created a whole program. I created a dance team, and got it off the ground and had a lot of success with my students and performances that we put on for their parents and helping them to build confidence in themselves and all of those different things. And it was quite an experience. And that ultimately led me moving back to Oregon because I had a baby and I wanted to raise him in Oregon. And I ended up working at a community college and became a GED instructor. And again, had never taught in the classroom with an academic subject like social studies and language arts. But I was like, okay, I can figure it out. And I did. And I did it for 10 years and had a lot of success helping a lot of students earn their GEDs and do something that's called concurrent enrollment, where they would take college classes and GED classes at the same time, and just lots of really cool experiences during that time as well. But what I discovered over those 13 years as an educator was that I absolutely love working with teenagers. I love teenagers. They are just at such an amazing stage of life where it's everything is possible. haven't quite figured out who I am yet, but I know I kind of like this or I kind of like that. And, it's like if they have the right mentorship and the right direction at that moment, it's like they can believe in themselves enough to go after their dreams and to go after the things that feel important to them. And so being with them, being a mentor or a teacher or a guide with them at that pivotal moment, I saw the impact it can have. Even if it's just like those little moments between lessons where we're, giving a high five or telling them congratulations on a test or sitting with them in an advising appointment and helping them with their next steps or just telling them the strengths that we see in them, that we know that they can do it, just having someone in their corner that believes in them, I saw how impactful that was. And ultimately, even though I loved being a teacher, I knew I was not able to make the kind of impact that I wanted to make in the classroom, that I really wanted to be doing out in the wilderness or, in one-on-one sessions where we're talking about things besides the next test they need to take or the next homework assignment that they need to do. I wanted to talk about the soul stuff, the heart stuff, the deep stuff. I wanted to talk about what their dreams were, what they were scared of, things that they'd persevered through. I wanted to talk about things that really mattered to them, things that they were worried about, friendships that they were navigating, just all the things that, really, either kept them up at night or made them feel inspired or whatever it was. And I had been, wanting to do this work of leading these trips, these rites of passage trips for a long time. And I had assisted on many and apprenticed and done lots of trainings and all of the things, but I wanted to lead them myself. But it was really scary. Like, I don't know where to start. I don't know if I have what it takes. The imposter syndrome would kick in of like, who am I to do this or whatnot. But ultimately, again, it was like, no, I've done hard things before. I can figure this out. And so I decided that I was going to go get my life coaching certification. That would enable me to kind of build a business around coaching teenagers, but also being able to bring them out into the wilderness as well with my rites of passage, backpacking training, and all of that, that those things could come together and I would have this thing to offer in a different way. And so I did that. I got my coaching certification. I got certified through the International Coaching Federation, which is, an overseeing body that helps certify coaches across the globe. And it's one of the gold standards in coaching where you can really rest assured that, the ethics are going to be there and the principles are going to be there and that the person has been mentored and trained in a really good way. And then I went through, trauma-informed coaching certifications and lots of other different trainings and professional development in order to really hone that craft. And then I worked for a company where they sent me referrals all the time. So over the last 5 years, I've coached hundreds and hundreds of people in one-on-one sessions and in group sessions, and then created my own programs, created my Rise Up and Ignite coaching program for teens and young adults, created parent coaching, created a whole platform for a parent coaching community, created my in-person teen circles where I hold counsel with the young people where we can sit in counsel and talk about things that matter to them and play games and where they can have mentorship and make quality friendships. And then I had this rites of passage work that I'm like, I want to get this work out there. And so I started Guided Passages in 2022, and 2023 was the first year I tried to put a trip out. And that trip was going to be for 18 to 24-year-olds in the Marble Mountains. And I, did everything that I could on my end that I knew to do to get the word out, as far as posting it on local Facebook pages and putting it on my social media and trying to do word of mouth and all of that, going to networking events and sharing it with people. And that first year, I hired guides for the trip. I got the insurance. I got the permit. I created the whole plan. I did all of the logistical pieces to make this trip happen. And I did not get a single kid to sign up. And at some point, about a month before the trip was supposed to happen, I had to call it because my guides had to know if they were going to come or not. And I, was in that meeting with those guides that day and I said, it's time, we have to call it. And I was like, it's okay. I've learned so much through this. I'm going to use what I've learned here so that I can do it again next year. This isn't going to be the last one. I am going to do this again. And I was really, really strong in that meeting with them. But once the Zoom closed and I closed my computer, just started sobbing. It was so devastating. All of this energy for, a year and a half of building this thing and really wanting this to go so that I could put this work out and to not have anyone sign up. It was so heartbreaking for me. And I really had to grieve that loss for a good week. I really felt it in my bones. Like, wow, like I thought I heard the call and I followed it and I took all the actions and I had faith and trust, and all of those things that it would just come to me and that all the doors would open and then I would have this trip and we would do it. And it was such a eye-opening moment and not the way I wanted my eyes to be opened. And yeah, I had to really grieve and I had to even think like, God, do I want to do this? This is so much harder than I thought it was going to be. It was the same with my teen program. It was the same with my coaching. Again, I built these things and I knew how amazing they were and I had all the faith and belief in them myself, but I didn't know how to get the word out and how to get people in. And so many times different offerings that I put out, didn't have anyone sign up for it. I had to cancel my teen group many times, in the early days because I didn't have kids in the group. And so trying to figure out marketing and online platforms and all these different things, which were not in my wheelhouse at all as an educator. I didn't have to do any of that. In the past, when there was someone to teach, people brought them to me. They just said, you show up and then the people will be there. And that was not the case here. And so I had to decide like, wow, I didn't know it was going to be this hard. I did not know what I was getting myself into. And I had to really have those like come to Jesus moments like, can I do this? Can I continue to persevere and have grit even when it's not working out like I thought it was going to work out? Like I said, I thought it was going to just open up for me, right away. And it didn't. It wasn't the case. And so I allowed myself that grief. I allowed myself that week of a full pity party. Like, this is so hard. I can't do this. I'm not cut out for this. And then I put my shoulders back again and I set my arrow forward again. And I said, no, this is the call that I heard. And I know this is the work I'm meant to do. And I am going to figure this out. And I'm going to take what I just learned, all the things that didn't work, and I'm going to figure out how to do it differently so that I can make it work next time. And so I just kept doing that with all of my offerings over and over and over again. Disappointment, failure, embarrassment, all these different things over and over until I could finally find the key that turned just right in one small area and I would get a win and I would celebrate that moment. And that's why when I was in the gym today and I was like, wow, I sold out a trip for the first time. Sold out a trip. I want to announce it and shout it on the mountaintop because it deserves celebrating. When we finally push through all those obstacles and those barriers and we have that moment of success, that moment of achievement of like, oh my gosh, I did it. Like, I want to make a note because I want to tell my brain like, hey, you can do hard things. You can do the things you put your mind to. It might not be easy. It might take way longer than you ever thought possible. But if you stick with it, if you are unrelenting in your determination and you continue to put the action and the faith and the belief and all the things into it, it will happen. And I've seen it. I've seen that for myself. I'm here to give testimony that like, hey, I did it. And it's not to say that it's all perfect and that my business is 100% like thriving in every level all the time, but to say that I did this one thing. And I have a full team group in person right now, and I have a full roster of teen clients that I get to sit with every week, and I have parents that I'm coaching right now. So all those things that I've been building for the last 4.5 years are starting to bloom and blossom and bear fruit. And that's amazing. But just to backtrack a tiny bit, so that first year, I didn't run a trip. Year 2, I decided to put out 2 trips. I put out a middle school trip for 12 to 14-year-olds, and I put out my young adult trip again for 18 to 24-year-olds. And this time, the middle school trip, I got 10 kids signed up. There were 12 spots. I got 10 signed up. And it was amazing, and it went off beautifully. And I was so, so proud of how it went and the impact it made. But my young adult trip, I again got 0 signups, none, 0. Okay, so I was like, dang it, all right. Strike 2. And then the next year, I put out a middle school trip again and a young adult trip again. And the middle school trip, I ended up getting 9 signed up. And the young adult trip, I got 2. And 2 wasn't enough to run it. So for the 3rd time in a row, I had to cancel that trip. And then this year, this is the 4th year of putting out trips. I put out a middle school trip and a high school girls trip. And my middle school trip is sold out. So first time ever being sold out. And my high school trip, I have already, a good handful of kids on it, and I still have some spots left. But that trip's going to run too. So this is going to be the first year that I have 2 trips that are running. One of them is sold out. The other one is going to be sold out. That's what I am putting out into the universe right now here on the podcast. You heard it here first. I'm going to sell this trip out. And so I'm announcing it here, and I'm hoping that you are going to call me and you're going to sign your girl up, because you will not want her to miss this. And this is not just something for her, but these rite of passage moments that our kids go through, they're also rite of passage moments for us as parents. I'm experiencing that right now with my 18-year-old senior. As he goes off, into his next phase of life and he steps into his adulthood, I am going through a rite of passage of letting my baby go, right? My life is changing. I was his mother for 18 years, having him right here in my little nest, where I could just keep an eye on him and keep him safe and all the things. And I have to let that go. And so that's a big rite of passage for me and for all of you who have teenagers that are, stepping into the next phase of their adolescence. So they're stepping into their adulthood. As they make those steps and they move towards more independence, more autonomy, it requires you to let go and surrender. And that's a rite of passage. And so when I run my trips, part of the experience is bringing the parents in at the end for the welcome home ceremony, where the teenagers get to tell their story of their rite of passage. And one of the guides, reflects back what they heard. And then you as the parent get to reflect back what you heard and tell them how proud you are of them, and make it a moment for your whole family where, in front of witnesses, you get to say the things that are on your heart to your kid and give them a gift to symbolize this moment of transition. And then we get to kind of alchemize the experience. And it's not something that just gets rushed past and we just move on to the next thing. But no, we stop and we mark the moment and we say, this is important. Something important just happened here. And we are going to witness it and we're going to celebrate it and we're going to make a moment out of it. And when we do that, we make medicine, not just for our kids' lives, but for our own lives. Because something shifts in us and we want to have an orientation for that. We want to have a way to work with that, and have that community holding us in that as well. Like, wow, I'm not the only parent that's going through this moment right here. There's this community of parents that are, ushering their kids through their rite of passage, and we're all here together holding this together. So all that to say that through my story, right, of passage and through these different things that I have taken on in my life and persevered through, what it enables is me to remember that when I stick with something when I don't give up on myself, when I continue to come towards something with a growth mindset and to learn from mistakes, learn from failures, and not make it mean something about me, not make it mean that like I'm incapable or I don't have what it takes, but instead I use it as feedback, as fuel to figure it out differently, then I can go to where I want to go. And there's always that next layer that we can get to. So once I'm here, it's like, okay, great. Now I want to fill that next trip. Now I want to get this other program up and thriving. How can I figure that out? What can I do next? And if I believe in myself, if I believe in what I'm doing, if I'm passionate about it, I can figure it out. And so can your teen, and so can you. And so I want you to think today, what's that thing for me that I have been wanting to do but haven't done yet? Maybe I didn't quite believe I could do it. Maybe I didn't believe I was capable. Maybe I didn't believe I had what it took. Maybe I didn't believe I had the strength or the intelligence or the capacity. But I would invite the idea that you do. That if you heard that call inside your ear, that it was made for you. And we want to listen to those things. And as I've explained through this whole episode, it's not easy. It's easier to stay and do the thing that's comfortable, right? In the comfort zone. Your brain really wants you to stay there. But you don't get all the richness. You don't get all the lessons. You don't get the growth. You don't get the expansion of your mind and what's possible. You don't get the fullness of this life experience. And that's what we're here to do. We're here to experience it, to live it, to go after it. Whatever that is. And when our teenagers see us do that, when they see us follow our dreams, that empowers them. Like, wow, mom did that. Wow, my dad did that. Right? And then they can like have that as a model of like what's possible for them. And that's the goods. I've shared this Carl Jung quote, at least in one other episode, but it seems appropriate right now. And the quote is that the greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents. And yeah, I just think that's something that we often forget in the day-to-day of trying to hold it all together and put the food on the table and, get them from their things, their sports events and all their things, all the to-dos of life. And sometimes it's just like feels like survival of just making it day to day. But we want to remember that the passions that we hold in our heart and the dreams that we have and the ways that we want to give back, we want to give our gifts in the world. Those things matter. There is a way, even when we're busy. The things that I have been doing over these last 4.5 years have been in the midst of raising my teenagers. It has been immense. I work sometimes 80 to 100 hours in a week. I get up at 4 a.m. most days. If I want to get to the gym and I want to do all the work that it takes, I do that. I have made it a priority. And not to say that we need to work 80 to 100 hours in a week to go after our dreams, but that's what it has kind of taken for me to launch this project. And it's not always going to be that way. It's going to ease up over time. And that's one of the things I'm bringing forward next is more balance and sustainability with what I do for work and what I do in my free time and allowing more spaciousness for all of that. But it's been worth it to dedicate myself and to, put the time and energy into it. When it's something that you love, it's not a chore to open your computer or to do that task because it's something that's important to you. So I just walked you through my own experiences and how my own rites of passage was the catalyst for everything that came after. But here's the thing that I want to share. Every single one of those chapters in my life required me to not give up when it would have been so much easier to walk away. And what I've discovered is that one of the most powerful ways to teach a teenager that they are capable of hard things is to put them in an environment where they have no choice but to find out that they are. And that's exactly what my high school girls backpacking rite of passage trip this July is designed to do. The middle school trip that I mentioned at the top of this episode, like I said, is completely sold out, and I'm so proud of that. But there is still room on the high school girls trip, and I want to fill it. So if you have a teenage daughter who is navigating that in-between place, who is trying to figure out who she is and what she's made of, this trip was designed for her. She'll spend time in the wilderness away from screens and social pressure, in the company of other girls who are doing the same hard, beautiful work of growing up. And she'll come home knowing something about herself that she can't learn anywhere else. So if you know in your gut that your daughter needs this experience, now is the time to act on that. Spots are limited and this trip will fill, and you can go ahead and sign her up using the link in the show notes. This trip will be happening in the Marble Mountain Wilderness of Northern California, but you can come from anywhere in the country. We have some people that are traveling from different places, and it just means coming in the day before and getting a hotel and dropping your teenager off at, the meeting point where we're going to drive to the trailhead, and then, meeting that final day after we come back. So you can make a trip of it for your family and do something while they're out in the wilderness, or you can come and drop her off and then go home and come back, whatever works for you. It'll be a lot to put together if you're coming from far away, but it will be so worth it. All right, so before I let you go today, I want to leave you with this. The research is clear. Grit, self-belief, and a growth mindset are not personality traits you either have or you don't. They are built. They are practiced. They are earned through showing up again and again, especially when it's uncomfortable, especially when progress is invisible, especially when the voice in your head says this is taking too long or it's not working, or maybe you should just stop. And I'm here to tell you, don't stop. Not you and not your teenager. Dreams are not meant to be fast. They're meant to be forged, and the version of you that comes out on the other side of staying committed, of choosing courage over comfort, of refusing to let the fear of failure be louder than the fire inside of you, that version is worth every hard moment it takes to become who you are. You have what it takes. You just have to decide to keep going. If this episode spoke to you, share it with another parent, share it with your teenager, and if you're not already part of our community, come find us. The link to the high school backpacking trip is in the show notes, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye, everyone. Did you enjoy the show? If so, would you take 30 seconds to subscribe so you don't miss an episode? Leave a quick review so more parents can find these conversations, and maybe even share this episode to your stories. And if you want to connect, please send me a DM on Instagram. I'm at jasmine.guidedpassages, and that's Jasmine with a Y. Thanks so much for being here, and I'll talk to you next week.